In today's video, we're going to go over access control in Swift. What is access control? Access control in Swift is a way to control what parts of your code can be seen or used from other places. It helps protect internal logic, prevent bugs, and keep your code clean. In Swift, there are 6 different access levels. There's open, public, internal, private, file private, and package. But in this video, we're mainly going to be focusing on private and file private. For now, if you're just starting out, you don't need to worry about public and open. These are useful if you're making packages, frameworks, or libraries. Oh, and package is the same. It's exclusively used for access within Swift packages, but again, you don't need to worry about that one. By default, anything you write in Swift is going to be internal. It is internal relative to the app or project that you are currently in. This struct, for example, is internal. We can use it in this playground whenever we want, but if we create a new playground or a new project, then we can't access the struct. It is internal to this project and this project only. So, like I mentioned, what we're going to be covering today is private and file private. We'll start with the same code from the previous video that I did on mutating functions. You can check out that video if you want to learn how and when to use mutating functions. In that video, we created a counter struct. And on top of that, something else we can do, instead of calling this increment function, we could also do counter1.value, and we can explicitly set that value without calling this function. 40. We don't even need to call increment because we're overriding it to 40. But let's say that we don't want to be able to explicitly write to that value from outside of that struct. So we only want this struct to be in charge of incrementing that value, and we don't want to be able to do it from anywhere else in this code. What we do is we go up to where we defined our value variable, and before var, we're going to put the private keyword. Now you're going to see an error. It says that value is inaccessible due to the private protection level. What that means is we can no longer find that property to write to it. You can see here that if I write counter1.value, it doesn't show up. It doesn't autocomplete. That's because Xcode can no longer see it. It's private, so in other words, it's hidden. We want to be able to get that value out, but it's private, so how can we read it? One way is we can create a function. We're going to call it getValue, and it's going to return an int. And then inside the function, we're just going to say return value. We can't execute these commands, but what we can do instead is we could do print counter1.getValue. That works. We get 0. We can also still call counter1.increment because that's not affected by making this variable private. What we can't do is explicitly write to that variable. We're going to get that error again. A good analogy for this is picture a guy standing outside of a gated community. He can't see what's happening inside the community. He either has to be inside or talking to someone from the inside. This struct is that gated community. From the outside, we can't see the private things happening. So we need to talk to someone from the inside. In this case, we're talking to this function. Now, another way that you could read this value is by adding the set keyword in parentheses. So now it's private set var value equals 0. What set does in this context is it allows outside reads, but not outside writes. So we can go back to our old code of print counter1.value, and we get 5. We just can't write to it, so we can't say counter1.value equals 30. Because of this error here, it says we cannot assign to property value because the setter is inaccessible. We can't set that property from the outside, we can only read it. If you go back to our gated community analogy, this would be the equivalent of having a camera inside the gated community and it's live streaming the feeds to the outside. We can't interfere with anything happening inside, we can only observe. So you might be wondering, why would I use this function to retrieve the value if I can just use private set? And the answer to that is it's use case specific. Say that when you want to get the value, you also want to do something else. You want to print something, or you want to make a call somewhere else. That's where this function is useful. You might have other ideas of what you want to do when you're retrieving that value. It's really up to your use case, which one you'd like to use. All right, let's move on to file private. Here I created a new Xcode project and I just added a second view controller. So these three files come default, and then I added a second view controller. Now let's look at our file private example. Here I'm going to define a struct and I'm going to call it car. And I'm going to use the car example from the structs video I did. We're going to have two parameters, a make, which is going to be a string, and a model, which is also going to be a string. Let car1 equal car. Now the make is going to be a Honda and the model is going to be a Civic. Now let's go to the second view controller. And in this view controller, it's going to have a different UI and it's going to do something different. But I also want to create a struct called car, but I don't want to have the same information as in here. Instead of doing make and model, I want to have other information like what's the color of the car and what's the max miles per hour it can go. Here we get an error that says invalid redeclaration of car. And we get that error because in this file, we already have a struct called car. It's telling us that we can't have two structs called car. Even though they're doing different things, Xcode doesn't see it that way. It just sees two structs called the same thing. Because for this project, I'm not passing information from one file to the other. I just want these two files to do different things. So I don't need to be able to reference this car struct in this view controller. So what we can do to get rid of this error is adding the file private keyword to each struct. Now we get this error here because we made this car struct file private. And if we're not able to reference this struct in other files, we shouldn't be able to reference this car in other files. So we also have to add the private keyword here, or file private, either one in this case. Now you can see if I create a new car object here, so private let car1 equal car, the color is going to be green, and the max miles per hour is going to be 200. Here I have two cars with the same name and two structs with the same name, but Xcode isn't giving me any problems. That's because these structs and these variables are file specific. I don't want to reference this car in this view controller, and I don't want to be able to reference this car in this view controller. So we use the file private keyword. Each one of these files is going to do different things, so we don't have to worry about referencing information from one file to the next. This is when we use the file private keyword. Say you're making a game and you want to structure it so that each file is a different level. That's not the best way of going about it, but let's say that's how you do it. You make each file a different level, and you want the speeds to be different. Say you're making a game like Geometry Dash, where every single level has a different degree of difficulty to it. Some levels are faster than others, some are harder than others. You would hard code these values into each file so that each level plays differently. You can make each file a different level, and if you're familiar with these games, the harder it gets, the faster the speed goes. So you can have two different speed variables. So let's say this is going to be our level 1 file, and we're going to have a speed of 1. But in this is going to be our second level, we're going to have a speed of 2. You're going to see that we get the invalid redeclaration of speed. If you set up a view controller, so class you don't have to make it a global variable. You can also make it a local variable inside of this class. But let's say, again, for whatever reason, you want to make it a global variable. You're going to get this invalid redeclaration error. So you can just file private it because you know that you're not going to need to reference this speed in another file. Each level is going to have its own speed. And we can also make this file private. The possibilities of using file private really are endless. Private and file private are extremely versatile keywords, and there's a lot you can do with them. They help keep your code clean, free from bugs, and you can limit access to certain variables and constants from other parts of your code. I hope this video served as a good introduction to private and file private. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to leave them below. And if you'd like to see more videos on this topic or more practical examples, please let me know and I'll make another video.